Welcome, everybody, to another developer interview for our Perceptive podcast series here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Blazer, and join me as my guest this time. He is a longtime fan and someone that I've spoken to quite a bit in the past. He just reminded me it's been like 6-7 years since our last chat, and now I feel even like older than I was normally going to. But he is on from Abbey Games to talk about Reus and Reus 2 and kind of catch up what's been happening with the studio since our last chat. So please welcome Adriaan Jansen. I'm sorry I'm butchering your name there,
Yes.
but how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. Thanks, Josh. Yeah, it's been a long time indeed. I've been keeping track of it, of what's going on, and I think you've been keeping track of it as well. So it's nice to see each other again.
Mm-hmm. Last time we spoke, I was still doing things just all audio. So I think this is the first
Yeah.
time we're having a video conversation, but it has certainly been a very interesting set of times since our last discussion, and we certainly have a lot to
Definitely.
catch up on. So, to get the ball rolling, since this is your first time doing things as kind of our live discussion here, could you talk a little bit about what your background is and what is Abbey Games for the people watching us?
Well, I'll start out with Abbey Games. Abbey Games is an indie studio. We're 10 years old now already as well, talking about feeling old. And we try to focus on indie management and strategy kind of games, with like I would say like a friendly style. Doesn't mean that everything has to be friendly, but a friendly style. And we're just a bunch of people who think there's a lot of interesting stuff to make games about in the world and try to experiment with that. And for myself, I'm the game designer and creative director of Abbey Games, and I've been doing that off and on in that role for Abbey Games for the past 10 years as well, because I'm one of the co-founders.
Mm-hmm. So besides Reus that we're going to talk about, of course, you made a Renowned Explorers and Natural Societies, and that
Mhm.
was one of my favorites. I think it was one that it was definitely challenging to get into, but I
Yeah.
certainly had a chance to play it. And of course, you also worked on Godhood, which I know Godhood went through a lot of ups and downs during its development. And I guess like how did the game eventually like end up? Because I kind of played it here and there while it was in early access and kind of like early builds. But I know that one was a very interesting challenge for you.
Definitely, yeah. So Godhood had so to stipulate the challenge. Uh, in the early access, we were not happy with the game that came out of it when we released, and I think a lot of players were also disappointed in what we delivered in early access, and we had to pull everything together during early access, which of course already it's not how you want to do how you want to make games. But it ended up pretty well, and we got to explore some themes that are very very rare in games. Specifically, for example, religion is something that is, I would say, extremely one-dimensional when it comes to games. It's a very important cultural topic, which we got like to tip our toes in a little bit and try some things out. It's still a game that is very experimental and both technically and gameplay wise, and that I think is something that still shows that it's a game that is obviously overstretching itself a little bit, but I'm pretty happy with the end result. It's a very unique game. I don't think there's anything quite like it. And there's also always the lesson for the next game that you make, and you always have to push forward, and especially if you're taking risks like that with games, sometimes you hit a home run and sometimes it's a little bit harder. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes when you hit a home run it's still a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know from when I played around Explorers, like part of the challenge of that one was just kind of the very different rule set that you and the team
Exactly.
developed for it.
Yeah.
And of course, that can be translated into with Godhood and kind of the interesting decisions and the kind of like one part God game, one part kind of like hands off, you're watching the combat play out.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's always that kind of challenge with games like this. And I remember I remember looking at like the original Kickstarter page for it, and a lot of people were like hoping for like that very like grognard, populist, black and
Yeah,
white
black and
god
white
game.
kind of thing. Yeah, that's always the case with God games. We
Mm-hmm.
we we come to notice like God games is not a defined genre. It is not a set of mechanics. It's a set of aesthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have like we made like this board which showed all the all the things that all God games share with each other, and the most prevalent one was there sure are a lot of color green and blue in those games. That was kind of the main line that you could see. But God games have ranged to from RTS to like puzzle games to like turn-based strategy and simulation games. It's all over the place because it's way more about how you feel. And specifically with Godhood, it was interesting because one of the key things that we wanted from Godhood, specifically because we wanted to tell something about religion, was that a Godhood should be a game where you are God, but where it would be, let's say, rational, or maybe not rational, but defensible for the characters in the game to not believe in you. So that like no, there is no player, there's no guiding hand here, there's nothing going on. Um, that's something, of course, that you can't say from Populous or Black and White, right? Like it's right there. Um, and that is, of course, it's part of why it's interesting. It's also part of why it's challenging because you're constantly trying to move around. Like what does it mean to make a God game? And with Reus 2, we have sort of again we have like this abusive relationship almost with the God game genre. We just keep coming back to it because we think it's so interesting. There's so much in it. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but it's also fun. That's where the cool stuff happens. That's where boundaries are pushed, and you really get to learn more about the medium of games.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting. Like when we look at the kind of like three main series that Abbey Games has put out, each one has like very like different levels of player interaction with mechanics.
True. Yeah.
You have again like with Rias and Godhood, kind of like almost like hands on, hands off. That you have
True.
very direct involvement in one aspect, and then kind of the game plays its own. With Renown Explorers, you had the whole kind of like emotional matrix where you can decide, of course, how you approach a combat, and that directly affects the enemies and what you're able to do. I
Yeah.
guess as a question for you, like from a game design perspective,
Mhm.
what kind of like goes through your mind as you're trying to figure out what do I want the player to influence over here, and what do I want to kind of like let the game kind of like do on its own, or like where do I want the player to be hands off in that
Yeah,
respect?
it's a very good question, and I think I would say that is one of the game problems that is uh, I feel is very underexplored. Of course, you had like the games like Dota Underlords, or the I forgot the League of Legends game that also had like this hands-off approach, or Super
Mm-hmm.
Auto Pets in lesser
Yeah.
extent. Um, so specifically for Godhood, it was more thought of like as a game concept. So you know, there already was this idea like this thing that is in like uh something like Dota Underlords, although it didn't exist when we started making it. But specifically, the game that we looked at was Football Manager, because it also has the same aesthetic that you make a team, but you're not controlling the guys on the field. They're doing their own thing. So there's this really strong hands-off aspect to it. So that really had that focus in mind already. That there's more to this dynamic than is actually made in games up until now. But generally, I would say it's much more of a pacing thing. It's something that emerges as you're making the game, because you're starting to find out. You start to find out like what are the good interactions that the player can make. And that's something you should be finding out first. I think it's a mistake that we made with Godhood, that we try to do the hands-off thing first. Well, it's important to do the hands-on thing first, and then you can sort of try to experiment with the pacing of the game, whether it allows for lengthy periods of non-interaction or low interaction, and what should be that low interaction, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think it's really experimental. It's really I don't think there's a clear methodology to it yet, except for that I think how I do it right now is do the hands-on stuff first. It's the bread and butter, and you can always try to pace those things out. But then again, you always run the risk if you do that the hands-on things become so strong that you don't have that design space anymore to do the hands-off things, and with that you lose a very important aesthetic of the game.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about in Godhood, we always talked about the word nashes, which is a Hebrew word. It's the pride that you have as a parent for if your children do something extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a specific type of fun, you could say. And that's something you want to try to design for, but then you start to have like, okay, but what are my hands-on actions? I can't move these guys around, and it's hard. I think it's underexplored because it's so complicated. Because you also, just the last thing to add, you have two games that you're making, right? Because you have the hands-on game that you're making, you have the hands-off game that you're making.
Mm-hmm.
Those two things do not exist by default, do not exist in the same space. If you make something puzzly here and you make it fun and hands-on, then you exclude it from the other space immediately. You really have to constantly ping pong between those two worlds to try to mend those two together. It's quite complicated. I think there are not many of those games for a good reason, and the games that are there, I think a lot of people would say they're clunky, or they have very short loops.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like what you just said there. It's very much that challenge. I see a lot of the experimental games that try to have like a very unique or very esoteric game mechanics, when the feel or the hands-on stuff just doesn't go right. Like I
Yeah,
played a game the other night where like hitting crouch instead of the character kind of like crouching normally, it just like kind of like is an automatic shift. So it's like stand, crouch like immediately in first person. It felt very jarring. And
yeah,
like when like the general movement, like if you're trying to get someone to play a game and just walking from like one end of a hallway to another doesn't feel right, nothing else I think in that game is going to work for that player, because they're going to be constantly stuck with, well, I can't even walk from point A to point B without feeling
yeah,
horrible to play.
yeah.
And
It's
go ahead.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. Like from a production perspective, you kind of have to make your bets, right? Um, as Abbey Games, we will never be able to make something that Blue Byte makes, for example. There's a level of polish that is unobtainable for us. And in production, we always have to think like, what are the things that we can make bad? It's just as important as to think as the things that you can make good. As an example, which I really love in this aspect, is Undertale, which is a game that specifically does a lot of things very bad, and it works perfectly fine because it doesn't try to do everything right. It picks the right things to do bad. It becomes like this cult hit that is very strong on the things that the author was very good at making. Um, but you always run that risk that you're talking about. If your game is a lot about movement and the uniqueness is in movement, then movement must be ace. Same with Godhood. If there is this management aspect that is really about how do people interpret your commandments and how does that reflect how they act upon the world, that's a very big question, and that is a lot of things that you have to nail. And we started nailing maybe the wrong things, right? So we made like a city that is very visually super appealing, but it was extremely hard to make technically, and was also extremely hard to make artistically. It ate up a lot of resources, but it had like no synergy with the core aspect of the game, while other aspects of the game, got dragged down in the management and in the expression side of things. it's really those, you have to make the right bets, and sometimes, especially with experimental games, you don't know if you're making the right bets. I would say that the example that you have, if the interesting part is the shifting of crouching, and that is sort of a key part of why it's interesting to play that game, or movement is an interesting part of play the game. It's a mistake. It's just you thought you could get away with it, and you just couldn't. It does happen, but it's challenging to pick the right things. I would say pick the right things to make bad. That's the hard part.
Yep. Unless, of course, you have infinite money as a studio, then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, but it's still, you have to think about Anthem or something like that. Then still, you're gonna get nailed down by all the things that you thought you were gonna make good and that you made bad. So there is it's a common thing, like in strategy, right? You always have finite resources and infinite ambitions. So there's always a place where you're just gonna screw up in that sense, even with infinite money. So I don't think we have that much of a privileged position. It's just that we specifically the thing that is different, I think, is we are not able to copy everything. I think that's the biggest. So if there's very good movement, and say like a game like Halo, it's a shooter that has amazing movement. If we will make a shooter, we just would not have the resources to copy Halo as Halo does it. So it's just not it. That's the luxury that we don't have. Well, a much bigger project would have that luxury to copy good things, so that they can focus on improving on the right things that are new to them.
And from the other side, things talking about the hands-off elements of the game. That is something that we've seen a lot of developers also have trouble with, especially when people were trying to copy the Dwarf Fortress likes. And we've seen so many of these games where if you're not telling the person exactly what to do, you're telling them, okay, I want you to go chop trees down over here. I want you to set something up over here. If the game does things out of order, or if, let's say a fire breaks down, you can't get anyone to go pick up the damn fire extinguisher to put it out, and the whole base blows up. It doesn't... there are some people, and I think this is one of those very interesting aspects, that some people love that level of chaos. This idea that, I put everything down, close my eyes, the game...
Let it happen.
Yeah. The age-old, Sim City, I'm just going to drop meteors on my town as soon as it's done.
I don't care. Yeah, exactly.
And then there are some people who hate that. They want to make sure that every single thing is perfectly meticulously done, and if anything goes wrong that they couldn't control, then the game is obviously flawed and broken and nothing, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's, again, for you and with your games, it's a very tough line to walk when you're telling the player that they can control all this, but then there's this entire side that's completely inaccessible, and yet it's the driving force. To go back to Godhood, the kind of the little battles that you had with your followers. One of the challenges of that is that you're not really dictating anything. You can, you choose who's going to fight. They're doing it all, and this can greatly, obviously, impact whether or not you're going to have a chance of winning or losing the campaign.
Yeah, and it's and this also goes for Reus to a certain extent, because even though there were plenty of things in Godhood that didn't work as well as we hoped that would work, there are a few things that worked really well and that we're taking on to our next project. But the I think the key takeaway here is that you can look at these hands-off things as a form of strategic thinking on different levels. So what do I try to say with this? You have hands-off games, I would say like Dota Underlords or something like that, where the hands-off is short-looped. It's in the scope of a minute. It has many iterations, which is very important for hands-off games. So you don't play one match, you play 30 matches with the same building composition. So you're building on the same mandates, and you're iterating that over many different kind of ways. And that is a puzzle with a layer of strategic thinking it's still quite big, but it's a layer of strategic thinking that's between it, as opposed to a puzzle, right? Like if you would play Underlords, where you could move the pieces to hit the right guys at the right moment, it becomes more of a puzzle. A part of that strategic layer of, you don't know whether it's going to work or not, and you have to think in broad strokes, is removed from the game. Not saying that would be a bad game. It would be a different game where because you have more control, you have more, more of that puzzly element to it. And the thin line to draw here is whether the actions that the player has matches and also the thematics that are associated with it matches the expectations and expected outcome of the hands-off things. To give an example, in a Football Manager game, right? Which I think is a very unique game, and I think every sort of hardcore simulation gamer should give it a spin, even though it's super hard to get into, because you need at least 20 hours just to wrap your mind about like how complex the games are. Because you just think about like Dwarf Fortress that already exists for like 25 years and keeps iterating and selling millions of copies over the world. It's crazy. There is this expectation already, like, okay, you're a coach or a manager, so a loss is part of the game. Sometimes you lose a match, and that's okay. The world is set up that is okay, and that's just something that happens. You have specific expectations to that. The level of control you have matches the theming as well, but also the amount of things that you can do as a manager matches what the simulation is trying to do as well. So you can put someone in training to do more or better crosses, and you will slowly see that the number of crosses that you make in each iteration, even though the iterations doesn't take a minute, it takes 90 minutes, becomes better. And matching those two things together is what makes, I think, a good hands-off game. You have to have the right amount of control and the right expectation with what you would get with that control, and you have the right amount of iterations to play through whatever setup you made. In Godhood, I would say Godhood is too tight. Just like Renowned Explorers. Renowned Explorers is a tight game, which it's hard. It's you have to play your hand well, and the challenges come much more from the push your luck mechanics, right? Like I want to try this really hard boss, or I'm gonna explore a bit more, and I'm sure I can beat the boss with this team that I have right now. Godhood as a management game is also quite tight. Like you said, there is this chance that you will lose it. It doesn't have that leeway of iteration that like, oh, it's okay, this is just like one of the million years that you're gonna play. You can see your team evolve. You have all the time to stay with them. No, those guys die, and they die actually relatively quick for a management game. I think there's just a mismatch there with the mechanics with, like I said, what you expect that your management has, the expectations that the game has for how well you have to play, and the iterations that you can have with that hands-off part of it. I don't know that any of that makes sense to you.
As you were talking about that, it kind of brings into my mind kind of like how I felt when I was playing Darkest Dungeon 2 over like the last month. In that it's not like it reminds you a lot of Renowned Explorers in that it's a roguelike by design, that you're doing different runs, there's that kind of replayability, but it doesn't have that level of growth, like that level of variance. Like, as you said, like, your party defines your strategy. This is not a game where, on the second chapter, I get a passive that completely changes his character, and now my run, goes in this complete opposite direction. It's, if I build my characters around strategy A, B, and C, I need to make sure that every encounter can be won with A, B, and C. If it doesn't, I get smacked down, there's nothing I can do. The same thing with Darkest Dungeon, and for like anyone who play Renowned Explorers, try taking a team that is built around mental damage and go fight a boss that's all physical. And you can kind of like, you get that kind of a head against the brick wall element right there. And it is very difficult when you have games like this because you're trying. I know this was something I think we definitely talked about last time. You have to kind of teach the player that your run is not going to evolve that way. Everything that your entire toolkit is going to be determined by the first 90 seconds of when you start the game as to, okay, I'm going to choose you, you, and you.
Yeah.
And it's very hard, I think, to kind of convey that to someone, especially if they're going to this, like, if they're expecting a roguelike along the lines of a Binding of Isaac or a Dead Cells or even something like Slay the Spire, where, and to like bring this back to your point about kind of hands-on, hands-off, in Slay the Spire, it's completely hands-off what cards I'm going to get. What is the game going to give me after each round? But I can decide, of that random pool, okay, I'm going to try this card. I'm going to try this one. And that kind of gives a player some semblance of control there.
Yeah, it's like playing with flexibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, is the game designed to be how flexible is the game designed to be, and how much is it roll with the punches kind of game?
Mm-hmm.
I would say like Slay the Spire is very much roll with the punches kind of game, which makes it super interesting to play. While Renowned Explorers is less so. It might feel so at first, but as more as you play, the more control you get over. I'm gonna grab this treasure, and I'm gonna get that card, and then I'm gonna go there, and it's more of a, I would say, exploration game, right? You try to explore the space that is there and see what's optimally in it. And it's a tough cookie to crack, because, and I think you really should see. So I also play quite a bit of Darkest Dungeon 2, and I think that what I like more about Renowned Explorers, I think you're absolutely right. Those two games are in the same vein.
Mm-hmm.
You pick a crew together, you go through places, you actually have quite a bit of control over what you're going to encounter and what you're going to see in both games. But I don't think that Darkest Dungeon plays like an exploration game that much. You have the little side stories, which are fun, but it feels way more like Darkest Dungeon 1 in a certain kind of sense, like emotionally. While Renowned Explorers is, if you bring a new crew and you go places, you might make somebody happy that you've never seen happy before, or you might like punch out a nun that you never dared to punch out before. There's all this kind of stuff that makes the exploring part of the game very, very strong. And I think it's important for people who make like roguelikes to really think about whether it's an exploration roguelike or whether it's a roll with the punches roguelike, basically. I enjoy both of them, by the way, immensely, but they are different games, and they require very different approaches to both the content that you're making and the mechanics that are rolling into it.
Mm-hmm. And with this kind of idea, like the exploration side, I think that also brings up a really interesting point that we can also talk about with Reus, with the idea of optimization.
Yeah.
One of the challenges of like all your games, and even bringing back in Darkest Dungeon, is the degree in which optimization really can define win rates. As we were saying with something like Slay the Spire, the flexibility is inherently built into the difficulty. They don't know what exactly your build is going to be 40 minutes, an hour in, so they can't design a boss that just says, oh, you use this card, well, I instantly kill you. Yeah. Whereas with something like with Darkest Dungeon, and even trying to do like something like the final chapter challenges in Renowned Explorers, I'm talking like the end game, like the final expedition, those encounters can be very spiky. I think I've only managed to get
extremely spiky.
Yes. If anyone hasn't played Renowned Explorers, if you want a challenge, go try some of those end stuff. I think I've only managed like an actual chapter, or is the Final Expedition 5 or 6? It's been a while since
5. It's 5. Okay. Yeah.
I think I've only managed 1 or 2 Expedition 5 wins in my time, like
Yeah,
beating the Himalayan or the Mountain Challenge.
yeah,
And part of that is the degree in which optimization matters. Like, if I'm building a physical party, I gotta make sure I have every single physical item on my party. I need to make sure that those characters were upgraded exactly. I have all the followers that I need, and it leads into that sense of snowballing. And the same that can
yeah,
be said of Darkest Dungeon, and even going back to when I played Reus, that if there's a difference between kind of winning, as in I barely scrape across the finish line, low score, versus winning, where I get top on the leaderboard, I beat the grand final
exactly.
ultimate challenge.
Yeah,
And it's very hard, I think, sometimes to get the player into that kind of mindset, or kind of teach them that yes, you won, but you completely ignored all of this that could have boosted that win by, let's say, several thousand points on your score. And
this is extremely hard.
yeah,
Yes. Uh, like I think the only game that we did this correctly is Renowned Explorers, and I think the worst game we did it with is Reus, the the first one. Um, because okay, if you take with me that these kind of games, these kind of roguelike games are exploration games, right? There's content to be seen. There is these bosses and these treasures to get in Renowned Explorers, and there's these achievements to get in Reus that unlock new stuff for you. That automatically means that you're appealing to the fun of discoverability for any player that's starting it. But when people think about discovery games, they think about like games like Skyrim or something like that, right? Adventure games or that kind of stuff. They don't necessarily think about challenge games. Of course, those can exist as well, but it's quite hard. It's you can say Dark Souls or Elden Ring is also an exploration game, but it really narrows it down to okay, you're a hardcore exploration game. And our games just look very friendly, so they attract people who think, oh, I'm just gonna have a good time, and then they get chastised by a nun. Uh, it's very hard. It's I think the main challenge that every Abbey game has to deal with, which I think is a bit unique to our studio, is that we're making these games where we really want to tickle your brain. We really want to challenge you to move forward and try new strategies, because that's where our heart lies. Basically, that's what we really enjoy about games. But at the same time, we also really enjoy this whimsical sense of discovering what these optimizations could bring to you in discovery. So you're not only rewarded with a higher score, you're also rewarded with an ending that you never seen before, or you're also rewarded with like a treasure that is unique to how you did things. In Renowned Explorers, for example, there's a unique challenge that is extremely hard, and that is to beat the T-Rex in a friendly manner. It goes super far, and it gets you a unique ending. While we only have like 3 unique endings, and this is one of them. Uh, Almost nobody's going to see, but that's what we love, right? We love both that you try to do it, that you try like, I'm going to make a challenge for myself. I'm going to try to make friends with the T-Rex and see what happens. Sometimes nothing happens, but then sometimes happens, and I really enjoy that. I really enjoy to then say like, yeah, we thought about that you were trying to do something like that. But to add to that, okay, this is fun for the challenge player, but at the same time, we're scaring away the player that just is maybe just not that good at the game, right? Like, or doesn't have the patience to go through all of these things. So, Renowned Explorers, also by community request, has 4 difficulties, and the lowest difficulty you can just basically skip any challenge of the game, and I think that just works perfectly fine. Like, because it's a game that's about discovery, I think you as a player will notice what you think is more rewarding. Of course, you have the achievements as 2 versions. You have an achievement that says like you did it on the hard mode, and this achievement that says like, okay, you did it on the not hard mode. Congratulations, pat on your back, but don't think too highly of yourself. Uh, you as a player are able to discern that kind of thing, and this is also definitely coming back in Renowned Explorers, in Reus 2. In Reus 2, we also we see this as the same vein as we see Renowned Explorers. It's an exploration management game. It's a game where, specifically in Reus, you create the world for humanity to go in different directions, but the direction they take is also strategic element to what endings you could achieve or what scores you could achieve, where the planet is going. Of course, I could make that really hard so that the player, just like in Renowned Explorers, you really have to earn those 5-star expeditions, and that gives you a great sense of achievement. But I also must be very careful to give the player the option to experience all those things. Well, it's just trying to make a relaxed world to play with, right? I think difficulties are key here. But the other thing is also to design for high scoring, because you can go over the top. It is also designed for multiple endings, just like in Renowned Explorers. You can you could do like 1 star, 1 star, 1 star, 2 star, 2 star, and the game is over. You can do that. It's fine. You beat the game. Congratulations. But there's so much more for you to explore. Also have to design for that.
Yeah, a lot of good points. I also want to get to Andrew's comment in chat as well in a second. First of all, I want to go back to what you said a few minutes ago about kind of like the feel or the aesthetic of the game sometimes clashing with the actual design. And that is something that is very tricky to do. I just recently played this platformer called Tiny Thor. It has like this very cute, whimsical aesthetic. Like, looks like a cartoon. It's all wonderful. You would think like, oh, this is a game meant for, first-time platformer. It's a very casual game. No, by like about
hardcore.
Yeah, halfway it just turns into a Celeste light. You don't even notice it until you're air dashing and having to do pixel precise jumps. And that is a very tough line to walk. And I know, like, with your games, like, all of them have a very kind of like storybook, very kind of like animated aesthetic to it. That,
to them,
yeah, you show it to someone, they'll think, oh, it's just easy-going game. Look at them standing on that mountain side. They're so happy. And then you get to, like, page after page of optimization.
Yeah.
And it can feel like you're just getting stomped all over. And
it's a hard problem as well. So for Renowned Explorers, for example, I think it only worked after Total Biscuit explained it. Because before that, it was so hard to, get the point across with the aesthetics that we have. I think by now we sort of have different expectations. We know what kind of fans we have and what they are expecting from us. And we hope that will just bleed through in, mouth to mouth or in the reviews that they leave behind when the game is good. But it's specifically, there is this cool aesthetic for it. Like, I always think about some Nintendo games could be really hard, but they have this very friendly thing. But from Nintendo, you expect it, right? Like, this is Nintendo. It might look like this, but it's still a very core game experience in the end. It's tricky. I think you got to get lucky with it. I think you really got to get lucky with it. Have the right fans, have people make the right expectations. For us, it was Total Biscuit. People that can explain what's cool about it, but still see the charm of the storybook thing, for example. It's very because there are people who love it, right? It's not that everybody who likes hardcore games wants everything to be black and dark. I'm, for example, someone who's very attracted to the art style that we have, but I am a very hardcore type of gamer. You have to strike lucky with it. You have to strike lucky with it that people can feel it. I don't think there's a solution to it. If somebody has it, I would be happy to accept any incoming ideas.
Also, as a quick time check, it's about 5 o'clock my time. I know we have maybe about another 20 minutes or so. We'll see if we get any more. We'll get questions from chat. So, for the people watching us live, if you do have any questions for Adriaan regarding Reus 2, please get them in, and we'll kind of sprinkle them in as they pop up. Another point that I wanted to bring up, like talking about the exploration side and this idea of, having the casual player feel really happy about playing your game versus the super min-max, I'm going to 5-star the whole thing, no matter what. Another difficulty, I know this is something that I'm sure that you've struggled with and thought about with your games, is how do you guide the player towards learning and mastery? And this is a very tough thing about roguelikes as well, or any kind of replayable experience. There are some people who they'll play a game like Reus or Biome Isaac or whatever, and they'll go, okay, I won my first run, the game is done, uninstall, I've seen everything the game has to offer.
Yeah.
Then there are some people who feel like, as long as I'm getting a carrot on the end of the stick, I beat a run, I unlock a house, I unlock a farm.
Yeah.
As long as there's that keep incentive, I'm going to keep playing. But the second I hit, you've unlocked 50 out of 50, okay, I'm done never playing the game.
Yeah.
And then, again, we have, like, the hardcore. Okay, I unlocked everything, but I want to beat this game, all difficulty settings max, all challenges. I am God at this game, no pun intended. We're talking about God games. And I want to get your thoughts, because this is, again, one of the things that's very hard. How do you approach trying to design this game that, someone can play at, like, the lowest level, but I want to kind of incentivize you and kind of push you, maybe even go a little bit higher this time, and then a little bit higher the next time?
Yes. So I think there's a little bit of synergy here. I would say that in most cases, the numerical side of the game is, or like, let's say the mastery side of the game is rewarded with mastery content. With that I mean, for example, an achievement, or in the, for example, the case of Binding of Isaac, it's rewarded with another possible random item that's added to your dungeon. And on the exploration side of the game, exploration is rewarded with content that is, fun and easy to see that you've added something to your game. I would say there's a little bit of synergy there, because what happens if the reward is the same, namely the output of something that's quite visible? So I think Renowned Explorers has that to some extent. Like I said, you could play the game doing like only 1 stars and 2 stars, but the game will be very clear that you will get rewarded with new adventures, with new stories, if you try maybe a different crew and try to push yourself forward. So this is on the side of pushing forward, and I think with Renowned Explorers, that was a real success. Sure, there are people who are done with the game after like 18 or 20 hours because they have the feeling that they saw everything, but there is a very, very big part of players that is story driven, or driven for like exploration, that played a game as hardcore as Renowned Explorers many times. It's just very content heavy, right? Like you have to, because you're not making like just an extra achievement, you're also making an extra story, maybe an extra enemy or an extra character, that kind of stuff. But the outcome is, like, I would say for me, like the perfect PvE game, right? It's the game where you can both challenge yourself and explore new things. However, that also comes with a very high learnability cost. So these kind of, I would say, complicated or involved strategy games or involved roguelikes, they have a very clear rule: you suck, you die. Right? There is no way around it. You have to learn the game. You have to learn the game to move forward. And a lot of people are just really turned off by that idea, right? They want to move on. And that means that if we design for both these groups, for both these players, we lose 2 very important things out of the box. We lose, for the exploration player, the possibility to push yourself forward, because he can hit a wall, right? He can get at a point, is like, I don't get like, he has been playing the game badly basically, but the game is not punishing him. So he can play the game badly and then hit a brick wall, and then suddenly all the frustration comes out. And on the hardcore player side, there is this sense of, it doesn't matter what I do, I just beat this game because I'm too good for this game in a certain kind of way. This game is easy and it doesn't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be honest. Like this is always an ongoing challenge in any game because it's a pacing issue, it's a learnability issue, it's also an issue about how much options you present to the player at any given point. It's a massive content issue because it means that the burn rate through content is a non-constant. So if you put like a lot of players together to play, like I would say, like the latest Horizon Zero Dawn or something like that, there is quite a pretty normal mapping of how long players will take through to go through all the content. If you pick a game like Renowned Explorers, it's crazy how big the differences are, because you have the slow, kind of relaxed kind of player, and that hasn't seen everything in 400 hours, and you have the guy who goes very hardcore for all the achievements and tries all the different combinations and gets it in 120 hours or something like that.
Yeah, but
It's
there's.
always an ongoing challenge.
Mhm.
I think it's more important to keep in mind every time that you're making content, like, for who am I making this content?
Mhm.
And do I still have enough production power in house to also appeal to the more hardcore player or the player that plays a lot of hours to also get something specific?
Mhm.
I would like to mention one very good example, which is Hades, where there's a very good return on investment of the game as you progress. You always get a little bit of story, but after you beat the game for the 10th time, the amount of story you get gets very, very, very thin. But still, there's still a little bit for you to get. You can still
Mhm.
move on. You can still play a bit on.
Mhm. And there's always going to be that group of people who will play your game who are like, I beat your game on highest difficulty, all modifiers on. It's too easy. Go make it harder.
Yeah, of course, but that's okay. You can
And
please everyone at the same time. There's always going to be the guy who's 10 times smarter than I am, and I'm sorry, I'm not smart enough to make the game good for you.
and I do want to at least spend some time talking about Reus 2 specifically, because we could
Yeah,
be here for another hour or two.
of
Like,
course. Yeah.
it's nothing. So I know a Slow Journey asked a question as well. Before we get to their question, one of the things I wanted to ask you about with regards to Reus 2 versus Reus 1, anything like specifically like different, or like anything you can like kind of tease fans about that's going to be different with
Yeah.
this one compared to the first one?
Yeah, so we're taking a lot of lessons from Renowned Explorers, and that's the first one. So there's gonna be more options and a roster type of game, like the whole management aspect of the game and the making combinations and strategy part of the game is much, 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 much better. This is sort of like really a game design talk when I'm talking about it. It's like it's not something I can sell so easily, but you can pick different giants, and those will make different biomes, and there
Okay.
will be different characters on your planet. So the humans are not anonymous anymore; they're actually agents with character. You can have like a villain who makes a city, who loves gold, and or he will be the leader of the village. Basically, he loves gold. He likes to make trouble, but he might be worth it because he has like these projects, like an evil laboratory or something like that. That is very nice to get some achievements, or is very good for your economy. But you have to deal with all his tomfoolery with the other villages. But you could also have like this animal lover. It's a guy who just really into animals, and you give him animals, he gets happy, and he doesn't make much of a problem. He's nice to get some food in your planet, that kind of stuff. So that's it gives a very strong strategic element to the game. Um, that you can mix and match. You can think like, I'm going to take these giants, I will use these biomes, get these upgrades, place these things, and put like one of these two characters into that biome. Uh, a lot of experimentation there. And of course, because it's an exploration game, we want to reward you for trying to try different things. So this is the other big difference, is that humanity now not only has basically one ending. In Reus 1, there was like this utopia state that they would achieve. But in this game, in Reus 2, it's really going to be a factor between what are you giving to the humans and what humans are you helping. That will influence the state of the world towards the end of the game. So, as an example, if you're really helping these militaristic people getting all their weapons and all their technology and all their army, when you're going to the next era through history, you will get the option to say like, well, maybe the next era is going to be an era of war. It's going to be like classic wars, or maybe something like the Romans of the Three Kingdoms or something like that. And it will, give a modification to what's going to happen in that time period, and the villages get affected by it. They will have maybe new relationships that they act with each other. They will have new behavior that they didn't have before, and that's part of your strategy. It becomes like, you start to learn what are the different outcomes that people can take, what kind of achievements you must achieve for humanity to go in one or the other direction, and who knows where you might end, right? Like, who knows what final destination your planet arrives to. It's something we basically say, like, any movie about humanity that you think about could possibly be an ending in Reus. Like a Planet of the Apes. Sure, some guy goes crazy with science, picks an animal, and now that animal takes over the city, and now you have a city that's run by animals. It's possible. Interstellar, you go to a different planet. You could like have a zombie outbreak because somebody made something very bad there. Anything that you'd like that talks about humanity as a whole is just possible. It's just for us to, make it, and that's just gonna take time. And we're trying to make as many of these things work in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that answers the question a bit. Like, there are more things that we have going on, but I think those are the two things that, as from a design point of view, I'm the most excited about.
And I remember from the first game, like, there wasn't that kind of like carryover. I remember, I think it was just like, you choose whatever like length you want your run to be, and then the run gets clean slate for the next one. So for this one, there's going to be more like of a persistent campaign or a grand campaign structure.
There is a stronger overarching meta game, I would say, but there's not necessarily a campaign, because we also want you to experiment with humanity, right? The tagline of the game is going to be like, you can always start a new humanity. They screwed up, like they made like this world war and they blew up the world. That's okay. You got achievement unlocked. You unlock the dandelion and you just start a new world, right? It's just part of the game. The session shouldn't be so long either, because for these kind of strategic, experimental type of games, you can't have too much of an investment, right? Because then you're going to think like, oh, I wasted 2 hours and now I didn't get the ending that I wanted. It has to be relatively short. So the time periods are relatively short. You go through history in like a quick view of humanity. But you do unlock new things whenever you find something new. That's definitely still part of it.
Okay. And let me get to their question. Soul Journey was curious, was there any internal conflicts regarding the game's direction? And if so, was there a big one, or what was the biggest one, I guess, in terms of Reus 2?
It's an interesting question, because there was, at the start of the game development, there was this strong, I wouldn't say there was a conflict between the team members. There was a conflict between what we thought that was possible with Reus. So Reus 1 always had this criticism of it being too much of a puzzle game, which we get, right? It's a high control game. So we tried to make the game a lot more infrastructural, or I don't know what the right word would be, but more logistics, right? Like a game like City Skylines, or that there are moving agents that need to go from A to B, and they take with them food, and they start trade routes and all that kind of stuff. So we made that, and we really tried to push for that, because we really wanted to have like this tiny little world thing. And it also had as a side effect that we removed things from the world, because we needed more of the world to visualize those logistics. And this was totally the wrong direction for the game. It took us some time, but this was totally the wrong direction of the game. Like, it's this idea that you try to force a certain aesthetic upon the game, and you just keep going on, but it just didn't work, because the world is just 2D, right? It's very flat. The logistics that you can have on that world are very limited, and also the whole idea between logistics and creating nature it's a hard sell, right? It's a hard sell. Like, okay, those birds, they have to go from there to there. Before you know it, it's either very complex and hard to visualize, or it's super boring and flat and it doesn't make any sense. So that was a thing that we had, but that was the only one. I think all the other things, we knew we wanted to make humans much more interesting in this game and really be a strategic factor. We really knew that Renowned Explorers is the best game that we made, and we need more of that choice making, more of that randomization, more of that exploration content in the game. So we were very aligned with those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of build what you were saying about regarding having more of a puzzle vibe to it versus more of an exploration vibe, that's also that challenge that we've been talking about in terms of, I guess, guiding the player through learning the game. If they feel that it's 100% a puzzle, then it just feels like, well, every run I just do this, this, and this. That is the best strategy. Therefore, I win every single time.
Yeah.
And again, it's very hard. As we were saying with Round Explorers, and I can see from chat, we have a lot of people who learned that game, who got really good at it. And part of that challenge is, again, conveying to someone the difference between you lost because you didn't do this, this, and this, versus you lost simply because, well, you just got a bad hand. That, maybe you didn't get the right item here, or maybe this person didn't get the right upgrade. And as we've been saying, it's very hard to convey that to someone about why did you lose? And again, that is a question that will be here for another 4 or 5 hours if we get really good on that topic.
And I don't think we have the right answer for it, specifically because we're going for both those those player groups. Strategic games have that element in general, right? Why did I lose? Well, it's not one mistake that you made, it's the sum of all the small mistakes you made coming up to this. And roguelikes normally are much harder at this. They are very the last 2 mistakes are enough to make you go game over. But strategic roguelikes have less of that luxury. I have to think about Against the Storm, which is also a game that has kind of the same problem.
Mm-hmm.
I love that game to bits, by the way, but it has the same problem. Why did I lose? Well, the timer was over before you got all the achievements. Yeah, but why didn't I get all the achievements? Yeah, well, you just didn't play well enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely hard. Yeah, we're just trying to make it so that the game always ends. Let's say it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Either the game is very clear, okay, now you just have no chance to go to the next era of the game. So let's finish off this planet. Let's blow up this planet because humanity here is doomed, and that's fine. That's also an ending. And another ending would be okay, you have easy endings or hard endings, that kind of stuff. So that's what we try to do.
Mm-hmm. And as you said earlier, kind of some of the examples we're now explores, having the different endings, different difficulties, I guess, can lead to different endings.
Yeah,
is another really good way of kind of giving the player. And I think this kind of goes to one of Round Explorer's strengths, is the idea that, again, you can win. It's not, the top number 1 on the leaderboard perfect ending win, but the player can at least feel like they crossed the finish line. Whereas a lot of roguelikes, and again, something specifically like Darkest Dungeon 2, that finish line can just punch you in the face, and it's no, you're not crossing this. Yeah. And the player just feels well, there goes an hour and a half, 2 hours of my time.
Yeah, I'll just try again if they like it, and or they go screw this, I'm never gonna play this game again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's a very inefficient way to do it, right? Because you have to design for multiple, I would say, player skill caps. Mm-hmm. It's very expensive. Renowned Explorer is a very expensive game to make, specifically because of this.
Mm-hmm. I know we are just about coming on time here, so I guess very quickly for Reus 2, in terms of I guess how long a run is. I remember you had the different time settings in the first game. Is that making a return in this one?
No, and also, I forgot to say, it's so important, but the timer is gone entirely.
Ooh.
So the game is, I would say, full RTS. It does have, time is a role of the game, but the game moves with the pacing of the player. So if the player is someone who, like a board game, let's say it like that, right? Like a real-time board game. You're playing together with friends, and sometimes you're playing slow, sometimes you're playing fast. It does feel that the table is still alive. People are talking with each other, and things might be happening, and deals might be being made between your enemies. But the game moves with the pacing of the players that are on the board. So there's no timer there, which I think is a very big thing for a lot of players, because it made playing the game relaxed impossible. The timer. And instead of having like these 30, 60, 120 minute eras, it's more like, you make what you can make with your strategy, with your resource management, with your giants that you picked, and with the humans that give their stuff and react to what you're doing. And it's done when the planet is done. When there is an ending to it, and then you can just start a new one. And it might be shorter, it might be a little bit longer, but in sense of time investment, we're aiming for maximum of 2.5 hours actually, because we mostly see also renowned explorers. I mean, unless you are a player that goes really slow and just likes to take it slow, but for good players, it shouldn't be taking more than 1.5 hour, because that's the sort of time investment that players like to put in new strategies and try new builds and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think the Italian from earlier, you can just destroy humanity just to get a dandelion. I think that's another good one there.
Yeah, it's just I like that sort of. It's something unique that I think only Reus has. You're not playing humanity; you're playing nature. Humanity can bring you stuff, but in the end, if they're being mean to you, screw them. you know, I love to say like the thing that we also went through to publishers, like different endings are fine. Is there in this modern era this nuclear war that destroys the whole planet? The game is like, good job, you found a new ending. You have unlocked like I said, like the dandelion or something like that, and then you can just play a new game, and maybe you can get a higher score for your nuclear war because you have a dandelion now, because I don't know, there's poison in it or something like that, and it gets things rolling a bit quicker. It's exactly what we're going for in the game.
One other thing, regarding the giants, you said there's different giants now. I guess any detail on that you can share?
Yeah, so it's going to be more of a roster management game, just like Renowned Explorers. Although we're not going to have 20 characters from the get go, but different giants would bring different abilities and different biomes, more specifically. And biomes are a very important part of the game now. In the old Reus, you made a biome because it gave you a specific upgrade type, which was a very obtuse and arcane system. Now it's more the other way around. Some characters want things like, I'm going to give an example. You have like this rebel leader, and this rebel leader has this trait, which is a guerrilla trait. And this guerrilla trait makes it so that if there are a lot of trees nearby him, he will improve your economy. He will give you more mana to make more things, basically. That's how you make him happy. It doesn't mean that it might give you a high score, but it does improve your economy. Okay, what are the right biomes for me to play with this rebel character? Like, the obvious answer is not the desert, right? Like, I'm not gonna put the rebel in the desert, or maybe I am gonna put him in the desert, but I really need to focus on unlocking these things for the desert and get some. And for that, I might need like the ocean giant, the rock giant, and the swamp giant, because those have the right upgrades for me to work well with the rebel. The giants are sort of the strategic anchoring that you have for the game. They have always the same upgrades. They always have the same options. And the humans are the one who bring chaos. And you're trying to, figure out as you're playing the game, you're discovering, oh, these humans like this, and I can put this there, and I'm gonna unlock these specific plans. That will be like more of the random part of the game, more of rolling with the punches game, like Renowned Explorers. Like the treasures that you get and the events that you get are a bit more random, but the crew that you take informs what kind of route that you want to make.
All right, sounds good. I know we are right at time. Again, I could talk with you for another
Yeah,
hour
me too. I
three
love talking about it. Yeah.
easily. I guess just some final logistics related questions for you, Adrian, and then I will let you go for tonight. But yeah, if you are free in the future, we don't have to wait another 7 years. Like, oh my gosh, I only want to know what's going to happen in 7 years.
Always send me a message.
All right. Very quickly, do you have? I guess first off, are you planning on releasing the game as a 1.0, or will it be going to early access?
I think that's more of a marketing question than
Okay.
because whether we release in 1.0, whatever we release, it should be good, not like what we did with Godhood. But it really depends on, for example, how well the playtests are running. If we feel like we could make a lot of cool content, but it's already very playable in the right scope of time, we might be doing early access. But if it feels like we should be doing that post-release, we'll be doing that post-release. It's either way goes.
Okay. And are you obviously you have the Steam store page up right now? Are you aiming for any other platforms besides Steam for Reus 2?
We're definitely aiming for Switch or whatever new Nintendo thing is coming next year. We've been people have been pestering us forever to get Reus on a portable device, so it has to happen. And myself, I would also love to put it on a tablet or something there, because the game, scrolling the planet and just management games on tablet just work well in general. But we'll have to see if that's going to happen or not.
All right. Before I give you my final question, anything else regarding Reus 2, whether it's from a development standpoint, marketing standpoint, whatever, that we didn't touch on that you'd like to bring up?
Well, we are going to start semi-open playtests next week. I don't know if there's already a message out, but well, you heard it here first. So if you want to join that, keep our store page in sight, because there will be the forum there. It's in pre-alpha, so there's a lot of things are right and a lot of things are wrong, but that's what we have the playtest for. And we would like to invite you to follow us and see if you can help us out with making it even better.
All right. So I guess one final question for me that I'm just curious about.
Yes.
We've been talking a lot about Renowned Explorers over this cast, and again, we have a lot of fans watching. So I gotta ask: do you have any plans or inklings to return to the Renowned Explorers property at some point in the future?
I would love to. The hard part about Renowned Explorers is that it always will be kind of a hard sell.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make it very efficient. I mean, I would love to work on it, but we can't. It's not a game you can spend $1 million on. Let's say it like that. And it's a game that's hard to improve. And that sounds a bit like a backhand criticism, but if you, for example, if you change the theme, you're going to lose your characters, but losing your characters is always a very high price to pay for a game that has such strong characters. But if you don't ditch the theme, you have to find equally or just as many interesting things as you had for the original, and it will be really hard to overshadow the original in terms of content, because there's so much content in the original that getting that in the second one is going to be a hard one. But there are plenty of ideas working around. I would find it very cool to do something in Renowned Explorer style, in old mythological Greece, for example, like an Odyssey kind of game. Somebody said, and I think they were right, Renowned Explorers is basically already Star Trek. Even the guys have different color shirts, and it would also work in that setting. So yeah, there are plenty of ideas going around there. So I definitely hope to do that in the future.
All right. So with that said, I know we've already crossed time again. I could sit here and chat with you for a very long time. So I think with that, my final thing before we kind of do social media plugs,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans watching to take us out on for tonight?
Ooh, well, thank you for joining in and hearing me ramble about our games. Yeah, like you're always welcome on the Discord, of course, and I love to talk about our games. We're just very grateful that they arrived.
All right. So with that said, regarding social media, do you have anything you'd like to plug? Sites, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Definitely feel free.
Yeah, so for us, the most important ones right now are the Abbey Games Discord, if you're already a member of it, the Reus 2 Discord. Yeah, you can look those up on the website, which is, I think, reus2game.com. I have to, yes, reus2game.com. There is our store page, there's our Discord, there's our Twitter handle, and all that kind of stuff.
All right, and for people watching this in the recorded version, I should have the links to all that in the show notes down below. So be sure to check those out. And our discussions made me really want to go back and play some more Now Explorers. It's been like I think at least like a year or two since the last time I actually loaded it up. So
yes, enjoy yourself. Have some fun.
There we go. With on top of everything else we've been trying to get done around here. But
exactly.
Adriaan, again, it has been a huge pleasure hanging out with you this evening. My time, I know it's late for you. Best of luck with Reus 2. I'll be happy to check it out when the time comes. And like I said, whenever we can kind of scramble some free time together for another chat,
yeah,
love to have you back on.
Let's have a chat. Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for having me.
Not a problem. So, for everyone tuning in, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out Go Play Renowned Explorers, Reus 1, Godhood, all that. And again, look forward to Reus 2 coming in the near future. For the new folks watching, if you like to check out my Discord and all my stuff, there are links down below. Do the YouTubing algorithmic stuff people tell you to do. If you are a game developer watching and would like to come on and talk about your game, game dev, or anything else, be sure to reach out. Other than that, that will do it. So, again, Adriaan, I won't keep you too much longer. I will let you get some sleep. And I'm sure everyone here will be excited to check out Reus 2 when the time comes.
Thanks a lot. And see you around.
All right. So with that said, everyone, thanks again for watching this episode of the Perceptive Podcast. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games. Have a great night, and see everyone next time.